Welcome to table for 92, element number 80, Mercury. It's number 80 because it has exactly 80 protons within its nucleus. For Mercury, I'm making some sushi. Kind of makes sense, right? We all know that. Mercury. Liquid at room temperature, beautiful, deadly, and just so happens to be in one of the world's favorite foods, sushi. So today I'm going to make a sushi roll with some fish that have the highest amount of mercury like I can get. That's the Atlantic bluefin tuna. This is like the 8th time I've made food with like a high amount of a chemical element I know to be poisonous, but whatever. By the way, mercury does have a metallic taste. Like you wouldn't actually be able to taste it in foods unless someone like sprinkled some mercury on top of it. But yeah, other metals like arsenic and beryllium actually have a sweet taste, but mercury has got a metallic one. Mercury is one of the chemical elements that were known to ancient peoples. Even though they didn't, have the idea about what a chemical element was yet, we have a long history in using mercury for so many purposes in everyday life without realizing it. And, everybody knows about it in food. Tons of seafood have high levels of mercury, and pretty much all seafood absorbs mercury, but it becomes a real problem with certain species of fish and different seafood. When mercury gets into a water system, either naturally through erosion, getting washed out of Earth's crust into the water, or, more so because of artificial pollution, because we use it so much. It's actually mostly coming from coal burning power plants, iron mining, or the purification of precious metals. That's where we get it most out of today. Mercury converts into methyl mercury through processes with bacteria in the water. And when it's consumed by seafood, and it gets in there, it's there for good. We still haven't found a way to really remove mercury from fish when you process it. So, that sucks, but there may be a solution. Selenium, the element most associated with high amounts in Brazil nuts, actually counteract mercury in the water. So tons of studies have been done in lakes and reservoirs showing that when selenium is added, over time the amount of mercury in the fish living in the waters go down. Speaking of mercury in fish, the fish with the highest amounts of mercury are like shark, rays, and swordfish, but those aren't really the kind of fish you would, use in sushi around the world for the most part. So for one thing, you don't really want to eat them raw. Like swordfish has just tons of parasites. I've worked with swordfish before, and I am thoroughly traumatized by what I saw, so no swordfish for me. Of course, a lot of sushi is frozen at 20 degrees Fahrenheit to kill parasites. Absolutely, but hard pass on the swordfish for me. I'll take the mercury over parasites any day. Obviously, there have been tons of studies done about the amount of mercury that are acceptable for people to eat. There's quite a few different species of tuna. All contain mercury, but some more than others. Big eye tuna in southern Atlantic bluefin seem to have the highest, followed by albacore and yellowfin, with skipjack having the lowest concentration of mercury. But that, can vary worldwide. Tuna tends to have the highest amount of mercury because they're apex predators. They're consuming fish with mercury that have eaten other fish with mercury, that have eaten crustaceans with mercury, that have eaten algae with mercury. Mercury just kind of makes its way up the food chain. So if you want your sushi to be low in mercury, you go for the bottom of the food chain. Salmon, crab, lobster, shrimp. That's a good general rule, but I am not your doctor, so don't take my advice on that one. By the way, I just love this. Sushi, it's actually a descriptive word to explain the sour taste that's associated with it. It's 1,000 years ago, before refrigeration, fish and meat were fermented in Japan with salt and vinegar. And so sushi really means sour. And I just can't unhear that now. Every time I hear sushi, I kind of repeat it in my head. It's oh, sushi, it's sour, it's that vinegar. Heat a combination of rice vinegar, sugar, and salt in a 4:1 ratio and let it cool. Add this to cooked rice over a wooden spoon and use 10% of the total rice amount. So 2 cups of rice, 0.2 cups of vinegar, almost a 1/4 cup. Mercury is miraculous. It's the only metal that is liquid at room temperature. And it doesn't stick to your hands too. You can wash your hands in pure mercury. I wouldn't advise that. Mercury, it doesn't readily get absorbed through the skin, and you can wash it off with soap and water. It's really a problem when it's ingested through foods or inhaled through vapors, but yeah, don't wash your hands with it. Mercury looks like liquid silver though, right? Quicksilver. That's where the name comes from in the ancient world. Another term for mercury in ancient Greece was hydrogyrum, meaning silvery water, right? Hydra, water, gyrum, silver. It's where the abbreviation Hg on the periodic table came from for mercury. Mercury is, one of the few chemical elements that ancient peoples, especially peoples in the Mediterranean world and the Middle East, they knew about. about and they used a lot. And it seemed like it was a gift from the gods, right? And like that's reflected in all the other metals that they knew about. And that was reflected in their worldview of celestial beings, right? The sun was gold, the moon was silver, Mercury after quicksilver, Venus was copper, Mars iron, Jupiter tin, and Saturn lead. So you don't have Mercury in a pure form being found in nature so much though. It's not like there's just like pools of natural mercury you can accidentally find out there on a hike or anything. It does rarely occur naturally, but like it took some ancient chemistry to figure out how to extract it out of the different minerals it's found in. So we have a long history using mercury though. Like as a source from the Earth's crust, it's from the beautiful mineral cinnabar. It's a mineral of mercury sulfide and it's awesome. You take cinnabar and you grind it into a powder and it makes a really vibrant red color that's been used in paint for at least 10,000 years. First known from the site of Çatalhöyük in modern day Turkey. It's one of the first urban centers in the entire world. So now we call ground cinnabar vermilion. You might have heard that, like if you're at all interested in art, it was almost exclusively used until the early 1900s. It was the go-to pigment for like painters until cadmium red was created. But in antiquity, vermilion was used to paint the walls of Çatalhöyük, was sprinkled into burials. It was used in tattoos. Yeah, I'm sure people like painted their bodies with it too. I mean, it was used all over. So yeah, beautiful mercury sulfide has been with us since the dawn of civilization. And it's not actually that difficult to separate cinnabar, the mercury sulfide, into pure mercury. You heat it to about 580 Celsius or 1100 Fahrenheit, and you rinse it with nitric acid and you distill it. Okay, like it does sound complicated, but Egyptians figured it out over 3,000 years ago, all by themselves. No help from the aliens. Like everything else they created. So the first people to figure out how to extract mercury, probably the Egyptians, probably around 3,500 years ago. Ancient Chinese civilizations figured out a little bit later, most likely. But almost immediately, folks realized mercury could be used to purify precious metals. Gold and silver dissolve in mercury like tears in the rain. Right? The atomic structure of mercury is such that it's a solvent of most metals, and it has such a low boiling point. It's only 674 degrees Fahrenheit or 356 degrees Celsius. So it means you can use mercury to extract gold and silver and then boil off the mercury you have, and you have precious metals left over. But yeah, clearly, right before I mentioned, like it's bad to inhale mercury vapors, it would have been a really bad trade to be involved with. Like breathing in gaseous mercury, it's pretty much a death sentence in the long run. And I'm sure people in the ancient world like realized it, but you know, like someone has to do that job. So, but you have to remember, even if tradesmen 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 years ago knew bad things happen when you inhale mercury vapors over long periods, mercury still would have seemed otherworldly to people in ancient times. Like again, it's a metal that melts at room temperature. It doesn't stick to your hands. It releases gold from its, you know, accompanying minerals, and it's incredible. It's a gift from the gods. So apparently the first emperor of a unified China, Qin Shi Huang, who lived about 2,200 years ago, he was fascinated with mercury, and legend says he used to actually ingest mercury in like pills in a vain attempt at immortality, a gift from the gods. Maybe if I eat it, I'll live forever. Kind of had the opposite effect though. He died when he was 49, but the legend says that he was buried surrounded by rivers of mercury installed around his body to mimic the rivers of China. And modern archaeologists are still kind of perplexed by this, but yeah, we know where he is buried. The necropolis is where the famous terracotta warriors are. It was accidentally found in the 1970s by somebody digging a well. It's still being excavated, and yeah, like the levels of mercury around the area are outrageous. So it seems like, you know, what seemed to be a mythological story of China's first emperor is true. You know, dude loved mercury. So yeah, archaeologists are very cautious about excavating around the necropolis, around his body, not just because of the high amounts of mercury, but also, you know, because they could damage things by exposing them to air. So there's a lot to excavate there still. But there are some ideas that the levels of mercury in and around the tomb are actually from local factories polluting the soil. So yeah, a lot of mercury. No matter what compound of mercury you may be exposed to, it's always gonna hurt. Like it affects the nervous system, the lungs, the kidneys, you know, all those things famously you need to survive. So yeah, it's most dangerous to pregnant women and children though. I think that's pretty well known today. Like when I was in second grade, I remember somebody dropping a mercury thermometer on the floor and it cracked open. Like everybody freaked out and they like, you know, evacuated the classroom. We weren't allowed in there for days. They cut out the carpet and and stuff. I thought it was a little bit of overkill at the time, but I get it now. I'm no master at this, but I find making sushi rolls, you know, kind of relaxing. You got to be, you know, gentle with it, but firm. And anyone who talks about, you know, their love of sushi will almost always say one thing: how versatile it is. Like, over the last 75 years or so, Japanese cuisine, I mean, it's kind of taken over the world, right? Sushi's everywhere, but it's changed, like, with its environments, you know, and it's not a big deal to add non-traditional ingredients. As long as it's good, you know, it's cool. Avocado, cream cheese, salmon, spicy mayo, it's all on the table now. Roll that up firmly like you would a fruit roll-up. Boom, spicy tuna roll. Top that with some spicy mayo, some tobiko, the flying fish roe. I just love this stuff. Like, that crunch is amazing. Funny though, it's really just like a tuna fish sandwich. It's like fish wrapped in carbs. I mean, it's so much more than that, but like, essentially it's kind of the same thing. Ah, and now the fun part, syphilis. Can't forget this fun fact, syphilis. We've been dealing with this sexually transmitted infection for thousands of years. And yeah, we as people used to treat other people with syphilis with liquid baths of mercury. There are tons of examples of this from antiquity. Yeah, not great. It's not a cure of syphilis. Like, it does temporarily alleviate the symptoms, but it does not stop, you know, anything like from the worsening conditions of syphilis. And this treatment was done like all the way up into the early 1900s in some places. So, you know, that was before we really had a handle on medical science. But yeah, this is another fun fact. The Lewis and Clark expeditions in the early 1800s, they were all riddled with syphilis, and they treated themselves with mercury. And that is actually one of the ways, like, we can actually trace their trip. The mercury they ingested to treat their awful syphilis was deposited in the ground through, you know, like their poopy. And the levels of mercury, even today, are so high in the soil, archaeologists can say they camped here. Like, the levels of mercury are really high. We found some artifacts, like they were here. Yeah, they left that part out of like middle school history class, but just riddled with it. And this brings us to the Mad Hatter, right? Yeah, you know, from Alice in Wonderland, which is based on a common trope, mad as a hatter. Hatter being the guys that made fancy hats back in the day. Well, the felt on those hats was stiffened with mercury, and the long-term exposure made the hatters all pretty weird. Mercury also has neurological effects and can cause strange behavioral changes in people, so mad as a hatter was a real thing. Yeah, Donald Glover, aka Childish Gambino, he actually did a silly skit about that back when he was only YouTube famous, like 17 years ago.
Honey. Okay, the spoons are after me. I need you and the kids to get in this orange. I'm gonna go build a lamppost out of cinnamon buns. That'll buy us some time.
Honey, I think you're sick.
I've been having an affair with this jar of peanut butter. But it's okay, because I can glow in the dark now, so our troubles are over.
Today, yeah, we still use mercury, but it is being phased out because, you know, we know the harm it does to people and the environment and the food we eat from that environment. So a lot of mercury today is still used in electrical switches and catalysts, and is still used in the extraction of gold. Vermilion paint is also still used, but, you know, you gotta watch yourself with that stuff. That is totally worth the mercury exposure. Unbelievable. So all in all, we have had a very interesting history with mercury. And, you know, like, I'd just like to say too, I am not great at making sushi. Like, I can at least get it to be in a combined roll. It just makes you, you know, appreciate those masters of sushi even more, like seeing stuff like this. So thank you. See you next time. You know, like, a smartphone uses 72, I think it's 72 elements of the 92 elements on the periodic table. So if you're watching this on your phone, just, you know, appreciate that and hit that subscribe button.